Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I'm your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today as we're going to be discussing something I think is rather important. On December 8th, we're in the middle of a lame duck session. And very often during this time period, just before we see the result of the elections taking place, we see changes in our government. No, we still have the previous administration, the previous members of Congress, and sometimes they like to try and slip in laws just at the last moment when no one's paying attention during the holiday season. And I think that's what we're seeing here today. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Now, before we get started, we do want to mention, if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to hear what you have to say, to hear your tweets, your chats, your phone calls from anywhere in the world to talk about the issues affecting us all. Because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to be able to, just speak. It's that simple. And we hope that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you will join us to be part of that. So today I want to talk about H.R. 8361. I'm very sure that almost no one has heard about it. It's not a very popular bill. In fact, it's got very little traction in Congress right now. But it is something that is being pushed by progressives. It is one of their issues. It's about gun control. It's about suicide. It's about your rights, your freedoms, and the growth of the government, the way the government is being set up to take away your freedom. Now, we know at this point that Hakeem Jeffries, who is a member of the Progressive Caucus, a well-known progressive, is going to be the minority leader for the Democrats in the House, which means they're going to continue to press a progressive agenda, not a Democratic agenda, not a consensus or centrist agenda, a progressive agenda. So how does that look? What do we see coming down the line? And what are they trying to slip through now in the middle of the cracks? Well, we had the opportunity. We saw this conversation, which was on December 7th of 2022. It's a conversation by the members of Congress talking about a bill, which again is H.R. 8361. This is the Preventing Suicide Through Voluntary Firearm Purchase Delay Act. It was introduced on July 13th, and it was introduced by Representative Jayapal. Now, you may recall Jayapal. She is the chair of the Progressive Caucus in Congress. So she is a progressive, a leading progressive, much like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many other members of the squad. And she is focused on trying to take away your rights to have a firearm through any means possible, through all the means that are possible. What H.R. 8361 says is essentially that if you are considering to commit suicide, which we denounce and we don't want you to do that, but if you've made the decision to commit suicide, at some point beforehand or while you're considering that, they're going to take away your right. The government, the federal government, will take away your right to be able to purchase a firearm. At some point in your life, you will decide that you give up your Second Amendment birthright to own a firearm. And you will go on a list controlled by the government, which will then prevent you from being able to get that firearm legally. That's it. And theoretically, there would be a means for you to get off of that list if at some point later in your life you decided that you could own a firearm. That's the theory behind it all. That's what the bill is supposed to do. That's not exactly how it functions, and that's not exactly what they're promising. Now, I want to go to some of the excerpts. I want you to hear a little bit of the conversation that happened on Congress. on the floor of Congress.
I've observed, so as I was wondering who would really do this and to what extent would that reduce the tens of thousands of suicides that we would certainly want to prevent, I did observe what had happened in the states that had passed these laws. And in Utah, I believe 5 people have enrolled. And in Washington State, though the gentlelady may correct me, I believe it's 13. So while tens of thousands of people die of suicide, there aren't yet tens of people in these 2 states that have self-enrolled in these programs. And so I think Mr. Massey's point, if there were to be any mistake, any circumstance where someone was then deprived of the ability to defend themselves, I could certainly see that being just as likely as this sort of virtue signal of a piece of legislation.
Okay, so what is Matt Gaetz talking about? What's the subject at hand? Again, let's go to the text. What this bill is saying is that an individual, through their own decision, with the support or without the support of any medical doctor, will come out and say, I do not want the government to allow me to legally own a firearm. Now, this has no impact on those who illegally get a firearm. So that's out the window. And in any given year, there's somewhere around 40, 45, 50,000 people who commit suicide a year. Most of those, about half of those, do so with a firearm. So we're talking about roughly about 20, 25,000 people a year. This is why you hear from so many Democrats that, oh, well, firearms are deadly. It's, firearms cause people to die at such huge numbers, and they misquote the numbers. It's because they're including suicides in that. We can understand that. And there is no question that the number of suicides in America is high. Looking at New York State as an example, we have seen that roughly about 1,600 people per year commit suicide. Now, this data is from New York State itself. The most recent annual report shows us 1995 to 2014. They do not provide us 2014 to 2022. I don't know why. That's New York State for you. But what you have seen is there is a trend there where the number of suicides has been relatively higher and stable since about 2014. And looking at New York State right now, the most recent data coming from the CDC itself shows that there are 1,642 Americans who committed suicide in the last, I believe this was for the year 2021. So the most recent data from the CDC says 1,642. Again, what we saw from New York State, that's a little bit higher than where we were in 2014. So the trend has remained stable, not really increasing much, but it is up versus 1995 and the period before that. So it's increased. Now, mind you, in that time frame, we have seen the New York SAFE Act, we have seen red flag laws, we have seen the unconstitutional reversal of the Supreme Court, we've seen dozens of smaller bills like the prevention of American citizens from being able to buy passive self-defense, bulletproof vests. So there have been a lot of laws throughout the time period we're looking at, and suicides have increased and stabilized at higher levels than previously, even though we've been promised that in each and every one of these laws, the New York SAFE Act, red flag laws, especially red flag laws, that this will prevent suicides, this will reduce the number, that this will protect people, that you will be safe. In fact, that has never been the case. That has never been the truth, which is why we almost never hear any of these politicians mention actual numbers. They don't want to discuss that with you. I want to go back to what is Matt Gaetz saying here? Well, the argument being made by Matt Gaetz at this moment is that this bill, and he is incorrect, and he is later corrected by Representative Jayapal, who introduced the bill because there are 25 people in Washington state that volunteered for this idea and 5 people in Utah, for a grand total of 30 people in 2 states that have actually volunteered for this program. And this is a program, a bill, an idea that was created on the basis of this willingness of mentally ill individuals to sign up for a novel proposal to prevent firearm suicide. And this study, which was done in 2016, 5 years ago, shows this is a study based on 200 people. They want to apply a law to the United States, 165 million gun owners, on a study on 200 people from 2016. This is cited by Representative Jayapal. This is her page from Congress, Congresswoman for the 7th District of Washington, and in this, she is citing this very study. This is the study, the only study in which she is citing that says this is the proof that we have to go by. No study has been done since 2016 of this nature. The data hasn't changed. We're not seeing an improvement. This is based on her information that she does not want you to look up. And I would have looked at the actual study itself, except I couldn't because it's behind a firewall, a paywall. But what we do know is that of the 200 individuals, these are all high-risk suicide patients. So we have a group of individuals who do not reflect America, and they probably don't reflect most people who are looking to commit suicide. These 200 individuals are the basis of the Washington law, the Utah law, and now this proposal, H.R. 8361. And even Representative Jayapal speaks at this moment to try and get her response about why we should apply this law, which has maybe 30 people across the country, that we should make this a national law and apply this to everyone. And here's part of her answer that she came up with.
Representative Gates, the answer to your question is you actually enroll in the program at any time, not when you're in the depths of your last, sort of throes and you're contemplating suicide in that moment. So
any individual at any time could go on to this list. And we'll look at the law specifically in just a second, but anyone can do this. You can just go on up and say, hey, I want to fill out a government form to never be able to own a firearm ever in my life because I think I'm a danger to myself and others. You hear that term a lot, my danger to myself and others. It's the basis of every red flag law in the country and every proposal to make it national. Okay, so she's saying you don't have to be in the middle of trying to commit suicide to be able to fill out this form. So that's one thing. Let's go on.
But people who have mental health illness have enrolled in the program, and it has then saved their life at the time when they are having tremendous swings or challenges. And
stop right there. Listen to what she said. This program saved 30 lives at the time that they did this. So one of the questions that should be asked is, and how many of those 30 people committed suicide after the fact without a firearm? Did these people actually not commit suicide? That's an important number. That's an important idea. Are we actually stopping people from committing suicide, or are we changing the way these people commit suicide? Because while firearms are one of the biggest ways that people commit suicide, it's not the only way that people commit suicide. See, we hear this a lot in the red flag law discussion, where we have seen their citations of studies done by Duke University and the University of Indiana, where they claim, well, this prevents suicides. No, it actually delayed suicides. 40% of the people who were in those studies still committed suicide or made an attempt to commit suicide. They just delayed them in many cases. And they used a different means to commit suicide anyway. See, that's some of the data that's in the study that we might be able to learn from, except it's behind a paywall. And it's definitely something that Representative Jayapal doesn't want to tell us about. So it's interesting her wording there. I think she knows it didn't actually stop anyone. It just delayed them. But let's go on.
And they suddenly seek the gun. And so that's what Katrina's mom
reclaiming my
would
time.
have done.
Is my data correct? In Washington State, is it only 13 people?
It's 25 in Washington, and the programs are brand new. But I guess I would ask you, Mr. Gates, how...
So the excuse is it's a new program. That's why we don't have tens of thousands or even hundreds, forget thousands, even hundreds of people. It's a brand new program. So it means it's untested. This is a new, untested program that has no quantifiable, no seriously quantifiable numbers, that we are looking to expand our government, increase the spending of our government, and take away rights and freedoms from the public, as well as the potential of any kind of accidents or anyone who's accidentally put on this list and how it would negatively impact their lives. Matt Gaetz is correct. Our government screws up everything. Lists are always being released. We have names that fall onto lists of all types of things in our government on a regular basis for the wrong reason. The wrong individuals get accused of crimes on a regular basis. Hundreds and thousands of individuals every day, every year. So to say that there would be, out of 165 million gun owners, 350 million people, to say that there would be a couple of thousand mistakes on any given year is both insignificant statistically and absolutely potentially, most likely, it's likely to happen. So we have more people that could be harmed by this than can be helped by it. But she's blowing past that because it's a new program, and she's sure that if we make it federal, well, then it's going to affect everyone. Let's go on.
Do you think it's worth saving? I mean, do you think one life is worth saving? Do you think 13 are, 25?
See, now that's a dodge. That's an emotional dodge. Oh, you're opposing this, so you want people to die. That is stupid. That is a stupid statement. It is a stupid equivalence. It's trying to grandstand morally. If this saves one life, then that's worth it. No matter how many people are harmed by it, no matter who gets their life devastated, no matter the negative consequences, if one life is saved, then it's worth it. And if you're not willing to save one life, then you're a bad person. Really? Stop with the moral grandstanding. That's meant to be a soundbite that's supposed to go out to all of her supporters so that she can raise money. It's meant to go against Matt Gaetz or any other Republican that's opposing this, that's in any way in favor of gun control, so that they can try and get them voted out of office. That is a soundbite. That is a setup. It is moral grandstanding. The question is this effective? Will this hurt more people than it helps? Does the government have the right to do this? These are the questions that she's not answering. Let's go on.
5, does it have to be 8,000 to be worthwhile?
I would suggest that the risk has to be balanced against the risk that somebody could be in a worse situation regarding their own safety. And, you know, the notion that we sort of begin these debates with a pronouncement of the tens of thousands of people that we're going to save, and then I'm not entirely sure that the 25 people in Washington State were saved. I mean, I'm also trying to...
See, again, he brings up the good point. All we know is that 25 people signed up for this. We don't know that 25 people didn't commit suicide. I hope they didn't. I absolutely hope they didn't. That's why we always start every episode with the listing of the suicide prevention, the domestic abuse prevention, mental illness. We want you to go out and get help. But let's look at this. We don't know that this works, both because it's a new program, so we don't know what the results will be, and we don't see that it's widespread. And this is based on a study from 5 years ago, based on 200 individuals who were suffering with mental illness at the time. So it's not a fair study or something that we can extrapolate to 165 million gun owners, nor 350 million Americans. We can't even extrapolate it to criminals.
Strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
And actually, I think I just want to ask a question of Ms. Jayapal if she'll answer it. And so I'd offer to yield to answer this. So you said, I think that Washington's done this, Utah's done it. Why can't it be left to states to decide whether to do it?
This is a great question. Why do we have to make this national? It's not that 48 states did this and 2 states haven't. It's not that it's sweeping across the country. Remember, red flag laws are in 18 states plus Washington, D.C. That's not a national law. We don't make national laws because one state wants a law. That's not necessarily the case. That's why we have the 10th Amendment. States get to choose for themselves. And Washington State made this law. Fantastic for them. Utah made this law. Fantastic for them. Why should New York State or New Jersey, Illinois, California, Texas, Kansas, Wyoming, why should any other state do this? Why should the public have this imposition put on them? Remember, the public's this is a federal bill. That means we're going to create a brand new branch of the government with all the employees that go with it, and all of the federal funding that goes with it, and all of the enforcement that goes with it. We have to hire new people. This is growing the government and growing the power of the government. And it's being paid for by you, the taxpayer, in a recession and in a time of high inflation. Is this really the best spending of our money? Is this the best expression of our government? Shouldn't this be something that states get to do and figure out if it works and if they agree with it? And then if it's such a great idea, then the federal government will jump in. He goes on to say,
Yeah, this was something that we talked about again and again. You know, we are constantly looking for opportunities to take proven programs in other states that work. And when Representative Curtis and I...
See, this is Representative Jayapal saying we take things that have been successful in other states and we apply this across the country, except it's in 2 states. So it's not something, it's brand new according to her own statement. Her own defense of why only 30 people have applied to this is that it's brand new. So you can't tell me it's a success when you tell me it's only 30 people and it's brand new. You can't tell me that this is something that because it's a success, it's something that's sweeping the nation when it's in 2 states, not 50, not 25, not even 5. It's in 2 states. So she's wrong. She's trying to obscure the fact that this is something that she just wants it. It's a progressive wish list. She's trying to pass it in a lame duck session of Congress because most of the public isn't paying attention to it. That's why she's doing it, because she doesn't want you to have guns. And she wants every opportunity to take away your firearms, your Second Amendment rights that she possibly can. Because she doesn't believe in the public, she believes in government. And she wants to grow the power of the government. But she's trying to hide that fact. Let's go on.
I started talking about this, what we realized is that this is something that really should be expanded across the country because so many states don't have this right now. This is not a...
3 members of Congress. She's saying, we think this is a great idea. We think this should be really successful. 3 members of Congress. 2 people who introduced it and 1 other member of Congress. That's it. There are 437 members of Congress, 435 that are voting members of Congress. That's just in the House of Representatives. 3, it's not even 1% of the members of Congress support this bill. Not even 1%. And she's saying that this is a grand idea, and we all agree, all 3 of you. Okay, let's go on.
This is a voluntary program. You can get into it and out of it as quickly as possible.
That's not exactly correct. We will prove that.
And so I think that It wasn't an easy road to implementation in these states because we had to take each one at a time, because the burden of setting up the brand new infrastructure to support this type of system. And I think that
There is a huge burden. This will increase the size of government. It will increase the bureaucracy of government. It will increase the cost of government. So we have a huge burden. If it's a huge burden that almost prevented 2 states from doing it, imagine when the federal government has to do it and have oversight over 50 states. So she's already telling us why this is bad. It is a bureaucratic nightmare. It grows the government. It is cost inefficient, but she likes it. Let's go on.
I've heard from other states that have not been able to make progress yet, that this would really help them to be able to quickly institute it in their states and get it going and help save lives immediately.
Oh, so other states can't handle the bureaucracy, they can't handle the finances, and the public doesn't want it. Their representatives in other states don't want it. That's why it's only in 2 states. But if the federal government does it, well, then they can roll it out in their state saying, we're just following the government. We're just doing what the federal government asked us to do. So they need an excuse to be able to take away people's rights, to grow the power of the government, to spend your money. They need an excuse. Just saying that this is going to stop suicide isn't enough, because no one believes that, because it's not accurate. It doesn't actually prevent suicide. So that's not working for most states. Most of the people in America, when they hear this, they go, this doesn't prevent suicide. Why do we need the government to be involved in this? Why should I pay for it? There are so many levels of problems with this, and there's a couple I haven't even gotten to yet, which I think are the biggest. So she's admitting this is a propaganda ploy. This is about manipulation of the public. This is meant to try and slip something past the government, the public, that they couldn't do any other way. The states won't do it on their own, so the federal government will do it to make it possible for the states to do it. They're coming after you. They're coming after your rights. It's a setup. Let's go on.
Just to follow that up, I mean, if they've run into problems in their states doing it, it might also be some people have some of the opposition or reasons for concern that Mr. Massey said. So why make that choice for the citizens of Kentucky? Why not leave it to the citizens of Kentucky through their legislators to decide whether it's a wise choice or not?
States' rights. Give it to the states. Why not let the states make that decision? If it's so wonderful, why isn't everyone doing it? Same thing with red flag laws. If it's so wonderful, if it's so effective, why not do it everywhere? Same thing with all gun control. If it's so effective, why doesn't every single state, every single city have all of the rules and regulations of Illinois, of Chicago, which has the most gun control laws of any city, of any state, anywhere in the country? You can't have more gun laws than what you see in Chicago, and it doesn't work. But yet, they want us to have that. They're trying to convince everyone, you should be just like Chicago's rules. We should have the same limitations. You shouldn't have the Second Amendment right. Except no one agrees with that. The majority of Americans do not agree with that. So they're trying to find other ways to filter this in. So he's made the perfect case here. There is no legitimate answer. Let's hear what she says.
I'm happy to give you my answer to that if you're asking.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, it would be like reinventing the wheel 50 times. We are constantly looking for programs.
Okay, it's like reinventing the wheel 50 times. No, it's not. It's not reinventing the wheel 50 times. If we're letting the government, if the government were to try and create the wheel itself, we'd wind up with a square because the government screws up everything. The only thing the government can do is take your money and wage war. And even that, it does badly. So that's a whole nother thing. So she's wrong here, and that's her answer. Well, we're just going to make this simple. No, you're not making it simple. You're creating more, you're giving powers to the government it does not have and should not have. This is beyond the scope of the power of the government. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, and I want you to hear what we see at this point.
Mr. Gates behind me, so I'll yield to him first.
Just briefly, Mr. Bishop, is perhaps one of the reasons why other states may not have copied this program is that there are more states than there are human beings that have ever enrolled in one of these programs?
Again, we go back to, this is so new, this is so experimental, this is so untested and unsure that no one's doing this. The initial study, again, I will show it to you. The study that was done initially was back in 2016. That was 5 years ago. And we're basing an entire government program on a study of 200 individuals who are already in the throes of mental illness. But there's an even better answer here, and I want you to hear that.
Massey, I yield.
Well, to your point, Mr. Bishop, now that I look at this, I'm concerned about the constitutionality of this, whether it would withstand a challenge in the Supreme Court if somebody couldn't get their gun after their name had entered onto this database, because the Gun-Free School Zone Act was struck down by the Supreme Court because there was no interstate nexus. And so,
okay, so he's just brought up two interesting things. Representative Massey brought up a great point. This is unconstitutional on its face. Okay? This bill, which is there to create a voluntary database, which will be held by the federal government, by the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, the same guy who's investigating parents for being concerned about what their kids are being taught in schools. Yeah, that guy. He's going to have control of this, and no one theoretically would ever have access to this database, except when you go and buy a gun, and then it'll come up in that case. And you'll always be able to remove yourself from this list. According to this, the procedures for removing a name from the database, the Attorney General shall establish procedures by which an individual may remove his or her name from the database, which shall include the following. 1. Removal upon request made to the Attorney General by the applicable individual, which shall take effect on the date that is 21 days after the date on which the request is received. So you have to submit this. So you got to fill out government forms to get this put in. Then you have to fill out another set of government forms and wait 21 days, which may be business days, to get off this list. And it doesn't mean that they're actually going to do that. They're going to create a procedure. That doesn't mean the procedure will allow the general that once you've jumped through the government hoops, then they will say, okay, now we accept it. So you may have to have an application, a report from a doctor, a bunch of documents that are going to be notarized, and you have to submit all of that to the Attorney General, and then they have to review it and confirm it, and that's when they say that they accept it, and then they start counting 21 days from there, which is increasing the amount of time and money and burden on you to get your name removed from the list. Because the key words they say is, shall establish procedures. It's not that you just give them your name, they put you on the list, you give them your name, they take you off the list. It doesn't work like that. They have to establish. That means they could set up any kind of room. Now, their rule could be you have to pay $300 while you're upside down chewing bubble gum and singing Dixie. Maybe that's one of the rules. It's stupid. It would be insane. No one would like that. But that's a procedure. See, it could be as difficult as you have to get 3 doctors to notarize a document, each of them saying that you're no longer a danger to yourself and others, for them to accept that this is a formal request to have you removed. They can establish that. So it's not as simple as, here's my name, I'm off the list. So there is a legal burden here in the fact that they are being vague, so it may be unconstitutional on that basis. That's real simple. But Massey also says something else that I think is important. And he pointed out United States versus Lopez. This is the 1990. This is the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990. It is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court ruled against it 5-4 because it violates Article 1, Section 8. It's the Commerce Clause. Now, I want to be very clear about that. Let's actually look at this. And all the links will be in the description so you can see this for yourself. What is stated in the response by Supreme Court Justice Rehnquist, he said, we start with first principles. The Constitution creates a federal government of enumerated powers. The powers regulated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. The government has limited powers. The Constitution is a negative document. It limits the government. It doesn't limit the people. The public have rights and freedom. States have rights and freedom. The government, the federal government, is limited in what it can do. He goes on to say, those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The rights of states and the public are numerous and infinite. The rights of the government are limited. According to the Federalist number 45, pages 292 to 293, this constitutionally mandated division of authority, quote, was adopted by the framers to ensure protection of our fundamental liberties. Going on, quote, just as the separation and independence of the coordinate branches of the federal government serve to prevent the accumulation of excessive power in any one branch, a healthy balance of power between the states and the federal government will reduce the risk of tyranny and abuse from either front. What is he talking about? Let's make this clear. This is unconstitutional on its face, not just because the burden may be excessive to be able to have your name removed from that list, because it's not as simple as just saying, I want to be taken off the list. You have to jump through hoops to do that. They don't want to tell you that part. But it's also unconstitutional because this violates the Commerce Clause. If you're purchasing, or if I try to buy a firearm in Nevada, I haven't crossed state lines. The federal government only has the right to intervene when you cross a state line. So if you're buying the firearm, or you're attempting to buy the firearm within a state that you live in, the federal government has no right. Only the states have the rights. It's the same reason why the Gun-Free Zone Act of 1990 was unconstitutional because no one crossed state lines. It was about things happening inside a particular state, not multiple states. So this bill, H.R. 8361, is a setup. This is usurping the power of states and you as an individual, because progressives aren't winning, because they can't convince various states like Texas or Kansas or Wisconsin. They can't convince the states to do what they want. So they're trying to find a way to use the power of the government to force the states to do what they want. This is about power. And they are manipulating your emotions, telling you, oh, if you don't do what we say, you want people to die. That's a lie. Same lie they used to convince people to take the jab during the pandemic. It's a lie. It is a form of coercion. They're trying to force this on you. And she knows this isn't appropriate. It is a violation of law. But what if it saves one life? Are you kidding me? Are you sure that's even going to save one life? How do you know? See, it's not like the only way people commit suicide is with a firearm. I know we have talked about this so many times because it's like with the red flag laws. We're being promised this will stop suicides. This will stop all of the people with gun violence. This is the answer. The government just needs a little more power. It needs just a little bit more of your money, and you will be safe. In fact, that's pretty much what Representative Jayapal says herself. And when she says, we are losing thousands of people every year to gun suicide, that is true. That has nothing to do with her law. That has nothing to do with its constitutionality. It has nothing to do with the growth of the power of the government. That's a different issue. That's thousands of people who thought they had no way out, who were suffering. That's true. And we need to help those individuals as best we can. 45,000 people a year. We need to help them. That doesn't mean grow the power of the government. The government has nothing to do with the individual. Maybe the state does, your local community do. You have a massive impact on that, not the federal government. She goes on to say, we can and we must solve this for the public, for this public health crisis, which has taken so many lives. No, the government shouldn't be involved. The government doesn't have a right in individual health. That is what she's talking about. We can and we must. The federal government can and must. No, the federal government shouldn't be involved in individual lives. Should they empower states to be able to help people? Should they help communities be able to help people? Absolutely. Help individuals to help people? Absolutely. But the federal government isn't there to solve your personal problems. And if the government is solving your personal problems, then you don't have any rights. You don't have any freedom. This is a back end to authoritarianism. There's this portion right here that really gets me. So in the operations of this, allows an individual described in paragraph 1 to set up 5 electronic email addresses to be contacted if 1, the individual attempts to purchase a firearm from a licensed importer, manufacturer, dealer, while the name of the individual is in the database, or the individual requests removal of his or her name from the database. So if you ask to get taken off this list, or if someone has used your name, stolen your identity, they're going to send out an email blast to 5 emails. What if you don't remember those emails? What if you forgot? Do you have the same emails of when you were 18? When you're 30? Do you remember all the passwords to all those email accounts that you had when you were 18, when you're 30? So the federal government's going to try and reach you to say, hey, you can go through this process, all this paperwork, all these certifications that we need to be able to get that firearm to protect yourself, only if you respond to the emails that you had when you were 18, which you don't even remember you had. You may not even remember that you filled out this form with the government, but now you can't defend yourself. I'm going to use the example of a woman who's 5 foot tall. No, you know what? A 5'4" woman, about the national average. She weighs about 135 pounds, about the national average. Okay? This 5'4", 135-pound woman has been taught throughout high school. She's been through all the classes, and the federal government has been able to put up signs on the buses and the trains. They've given grants to various cities and school systems to teach you that if you're feeling bad, you should fill out this form. It's real simple. You can change it anytime you want. Fill out this very simple form that says, I give up my right, my Second Amendment right to be able to protect myself. And the government will take care of it. And the government, by the way, is protecting you with 22,000 gun laws so criminals won't commit crime. So you're not losing anything. You're going to be safe, and the criminals will be unarmed, and you'll be able to protect yourself from yourself. That's the argument that those young women are going to hear. Okay. This young woman, let's say she's going for a master's degree or, a doctorate, whatever. She's in school. She's in another state. She was in one state, now she's in another state. This is, she's 20, let's call her 25, 26, 27. And at that point, she's now going into, let's say she wants to be a teacher, and they put her in her inner city school, and she's living in that community because she wants to be a part of the community of the kids she's going to help. And this is a low income area, which usually means higher crime. and they defunded the police and they instituted bail reform. So those criminals, they're not on bail, they're not in jail, they're out in the community. They've released 1/3 of the prisoners from jail, like John Fetterman has said. So we have the New York bail reform. We have John Fetterman's idea of releasing 1/3 of all the criminals. Crime is up. They defunded the police, which is a progressive idea as well. So crime is up. And she wants to protect herself. So she decides to get a firearm, to get trained, so that she'll be able to protect herself as she's in that community, so she can better help the kids in that community while protecting herself from men that are on average, about 6 inches taller than her, on average about 50 to 75 pounds heavier than her. They will be physically intimidating to her on average. And that's not assuming that these are hardened criminals who generally may be in better shape. But okay, let's just go with that. And so she decides it's now been 8-10 years since she graduated high school when she decided that she wanted, for whatever reason, to do what the government said, because the government promised they were going to make her safe. And now she wants to go and she tries to buy a firearm. And the government sends out an email to her 5 emails that she had when she was 18, to email accounts that no longer exist, possibly with companies that no longer exist. By the way, how many people remember what their AOL account is? Do you remember? What about your Netscape mail? Do you remember that one? MySpace? There's a lot of companies that have gone away that no one uses anymore. People don't remember anymore. So she doesn't even know what they were. She didn't get that notice. How is she supposed to find out that when she's denied the ability to defend herself, how does she know why? Who's going to tell her, oh, you got to talk to the government? Let's say that there's a gun owner out there who says, you know what, they denied you, and he just runs down the list. Gee, were you ever a terrorist? No. Did you ever commit a felony? No. Did you ever give up your right to own a firearm? Oh, you know what? Yeah. I remember something like that. Back in high school, they were having some kind of fundraiser. It seemed like a good idea. I was emotional back then. So that's what it is. Okay, here's the thing. Go out, since the government won't tell you why, because all your emails, you don't have those access to that anymore. You need to contact the Attorney General of the United States. You need to get a bunch of forms filled out. And you have to have them certified by a couple of different doctors that all say that you're in your right mental state. And then you have to submit it. It's going to take them about 3 months to review that. And then 21 days after that, they'll be able to give it back to you. Now, what if that woman's saying, well, I'm being stalked now. I have a domestic abusive ex-partner. I'm being given threats online. What am I going to do about protecting myself until then? See, this is how they harm women. I'm giving you a hypothetical. I'm trying to give you a scenario so that you can see this potentially hurts more people over time than it helps. Because it's not about helping people. It's about denying them the Second Amendment rights. It's about denying them their freedom. About making it such a burden to ever exercise your rights and freedoms that you will never do it. That you will never get your freedoms back. They will put so many hurdles in front of you that you will never recapture your freedom again. Maybe you think my examples are too extreme, but we know on its face, as Representative Massey had pointed out, it's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has made similar decisions. This is unconstitutional on its face. It's untested and unproven. We know that because Representative Jayapal has already stated that. And that's her reason to sell it to you, because it's untested, unproven, but she's very excited about it. So it's untested, unproven, and it's based on data that is 5 years old from questionable sources. this is really where we want our government to go. This is why we want to increase the size, the bureaucracy, the money, the inflation of our nation. This is what we want to do this for. Now everyone's going to say, well, Mike, this only has like a 3% chance of ever being passed into law. Mike, the Republicans are coming in. They're going to change everything. So, the fact is, if we don't talk about these laws, then at some point in the future, you see that these things happen. It's just like with the bulletproof vest in New York State. People were telling me back in 2019, New York State will never stop people from being able to have a passive self-defense. New York State's not going after American citizens. They're not going after self-defense that way. In 2021, New York State passed a law that you cannot own bulletproof vests. They came up with the idea in 2019. In 2021, they executed it because they had the power to do so, and they had put enough fear into people over 2 years to be able to make it possible. Is it saving anyone's life? No, not at all. It hasn't saved anyone, but it's still a crime. That's why I'm talking about 8361 right now. Because at some point, they're going to bring this back up. And they're going to tell you it's going to save lives without any proof, without any data, while breaking the Constitution, because they don't care about you. They care about power. Maybe you think I'm wrong. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And we hope you'll join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we discuss this with you and all the issues that matter to you. Thank you. I know you've heard it before. What difference does it? You make the difference. When you watch, chat, tweets, your likes and shares, and your subscription, you make the difference. From across the world, you help us to keep the lights on and the stream alive. You are making the difference to fight the woke and the crazy legislation that we see before. We at No Soundbites Allowed, and I want to thank you for everything that you do in helping us reach our goal, and your likes, your tweets, your comments, and your subscriptions to the channel. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. And this is a special thank you to those who have donated to the channel and helped us in all of our efforts. We will strive to make this channel the best that we possibly can, because you deserve no less. Thank you.